Well, I first definitely remember, like I said, I had that Born in the USA tape, and I listened to several of the songs over and over again. There's actually I missed a chunk of the middle album so many times because what I figured out you could do is you listen to the first three tracks, Born in the USA and Cover Me in Darlington County, then you could turn it over and you get Glory Days, Dancing in the Dark, in My Hometown. So like I listened to those six tracks a lot and kind of unfortunately, as I would discover later, it was, I kind of missed that middle part of the album. So, I remember listening to that a lot.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me tonight is Jake Ziegler. I assume not related to I'll See You on the Top, Zig Ziglar?
No, definitely not. Spelled a little bit differently. So
yeah, that's what I thought it was. But it's one of my best friends is Tom Soller, and he always when he writes his thank you, at the end of a book, he always does it in reverse alphabetical because with a last name starting with Z, he was always last. So he does that.
Yeah, my daughter's learning about that too, always being the last one. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Jake, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you decided to visit with us. Tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm close to 40, we'll say. How about I'm between 30 and 40 years old, and
Okay.
I've been like I was telling you a little bit before. I was born in Minnesota and lived in Michigan for a good part of my life. Also lived in Omaha, Nebraska for a little while, and I even lived in Montgomery, Alabama for a little while. But for the most part, I'm a Midwest guy, and was raised in the Midwest by good Midwestern parents, and yeah, and I like Bruce Springsteen.
Good. Have you moved around because of work or?
Yeah, that was mostly what I moved around for. I work in human resources now. So I've worked in a couple of different places doing human resources, but for a short time when I was younger, I was a movie theater manager for a movie theater chain. So moved around. That's why I was in Omaha and in Alabama. Used to manage movie theaters, and that was a lot of fun.
You get fun stories working in HR, don't you?
You get if nothing else, you get a lot of them. There's just a high volume of things going on at all times.
Yeah. I manage a contact center on my day gig, and I've been doing that over 30 years, and there's something new always comes up. It is, there's plenty of them where, oh yeah, I've had this happen before, but something new's always come up, so that's good. Well, Jake, I'm so glad you're here. Let's go back to the beginning. Talk to me a little bit. You're growing up there in Minnesota. What kind of music was your family listening to? What did you listen to as a little kid?
Mostly what I remember listening to was a lot of just like the pop, kind of pop rock hits of the day. Like I vividly remember, and I think I even still have some of the CDs that were in my dad's collection. I grew up in kind of the mid 80s, so I was kind of making the transition from vinyl to CD. CD was a big thing. My dad had a 6-disc changer, in the living room with the big sound system and all that stuff. It was very cool. But I remember some of the CDs that I really latched onto early on that I remember was Genesis, the 1983 self-titled album, and Invisible Touch. I remember were the two Genesis CDs that he had that I remember listening to. And we had Thriller, of course, and Bad were big albums. We had the Whitney Houston albums that had come out that I remember. Just a lot of like what was pop, kind of popular. Not really not so much 60s and 70s stuff. Like I didn't really discover like Dylan until much later. But we did have the cassette tape for Born in the USA. So I very, very much remember listening to that tape as a kid. That was definitely the first Bruce Springsteen I ever heard.
I take it you embraced your parents' music?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I still listen to a lot of that stuff. Like I still listen to Genesis, and I love Phil Collins and Huey Lewis. My dad, he had the Sports and Four, whatever those albums were, those big Huey Lewis albums.
Sure.
Yeah, I still like listening to that stuff. Yeah, so I latched on with what my parents liked, and um, I've even been able to turn them onto some stuff later on, like Springsteen would be one of them. They kind of got back into Springsteen because I wouldn't shut up about him, and Johnny Cash when he was releasing his kind of late life albums. I'm telling my parents, like, you guys should listen. I think you'd really like it. This is good. So I took some stuff from them, and then they took some stuff from me, and that's been pretty cool.
That's good. So as you got into high school,
Mhm.
did your music started changing, your musical taste expanding? Talk to me a little about that.
Yeah, it expanded. I was actually just talking with a friend of mine the other night though about how sometimes I get a little bit narrow in my musical vision because there's so much Bruce Springsteen out there to listen to, or there's so much Bob Dylan to listen to, and there's so much Neil Young to listen to. There's just so many different things out there, that sometimes I can get hyper focused on kind of listening to one thing. But that was, when I got into high school, those were kind of three of the biggest artists that I really started going after. And they had all the albums. Because when I first started collecting Dylan CDs in probably the late 90s, or the Springsteen albums, I mean, there was 20 to 30 albums a piece to go back and search for in record stores, and like find maybe you could find a copy of Human Touch in the bargain bin at Meyer or something. That was so there was so much to find, all these hard to find Neil Young albums, and these Bob Dylan imports, and just all kinds of cool stuff like that. So that's I really started getting into those three, particularly, Springsteen, Dylan, and Neil Young. And then, I was a teenager when grunge was big too. So really got into Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Nirvana and Alice in Chains and bands like that. So those were kind of my two main groups. And then REM and U2, got real big into them around that time too. REM was a pretty early. I liked REM pretty early on. My sister had the tape for Green, and I remember listening to that a lot as a kid. And I've REM to this day is still one of my favorite bands. So those are kind of the two. I like that old school, folk rock singers, like Springsteen and Dylan, and then like the real grunge type stuff would probably be like the two things I really latched onto.
Yeah. So talk to me if you can. When did you first become aware of Bruce? And
Mhm.
if you can articulate it, what about him spoke to you?
Well, I first definitely remember, like I said, I had that Born in the USA tape, and I listened to several of the songs over and over again. There's actually I missed a chunk of the middle album so many times, because what I figured out you could do is you listen to the first three tracks, Born in the USA and Cover Me in Darlington County, then you could turn it over and you get Glory Days, Dancing in the Dark, in My Hometown. So like I listened to those six tracks a lot, and kind of unfortunately, as I would discover later, it was, I kind of missed that middle part of the album. So, I remember listening to that a lot. And then one of the first CDs I ever bought, it had to have been like in the spring of '95. So it was when that Greatest Hits came out. The one with the white cover, he's got the guitar over his back. And
Sure.
I had gotten into watching the Oscars and the Academy Awards, so I remember he had sung the Streets of Philadelphia song at the Oscars, and I picked up that Greatest Hits. I was like, oh yeah, it's got the Born in the USA songs I know. It's got Streets of Philadelphia, which I had known and really liked. So I was like, okay, I'll buy it. I want to say it was that and the self-titled Collective Soul Blue album, like the first two CDs I ever bought. So I got a lot of use out of that Greatest Hits. And but what's really unfortunate is that the Greatest Hits, as I'm sure, doesn't have anything from the first two albums. So those were kind of blind spots for me for a long time. I hadn't heard a lot of the stuff on those early albums, but I really got into that Greatest Hits. And then I got The Ghost of Tom Joad came out later that year, and I remember getting that for Christmas, and the album was good. I would learn to appreciate it, a lot more later. It wasn't really like what 14-year-old me wanted out of Bruce Springsteen. Now that I'm 30, 38, I understand Ghost of Tom Joad a little better than I did at the time. So I kind of fell out of Bruce for a little bit. And I remember finding the 18 tracks compilation at like at a Meyer or a Walmart or whatever. And I didn't really know what it was. I hadn't really heard of tracks. I wasn't even that keyed in yet. But I looked on the the track listing. I saw, okay, Growing Up, and I saw Born in the USA. It's the demo version, but I saw that. And it's like, oh, this must be some more compilation. And I listened to the songs, like, man, these are really good. What is? And I had to try to figure out what it was, and where these songs were coming from. And that was 99 or 2000. So then it was 9/11 happened after that, and I saw him perform My City of Ruin, and then The Rising came out, and I was looking forward to The Rising, and I went to the store at midnight to pick it up when it came out. And that's really when I became obsessed. Probably was after The Rising.
When I always preface this, Jake, with the amount of times you've seen Bruce perform live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. There can be a lot of factors that drive the amount of shows, where you live, your economic situation, your age. So have you been able to see him live? And do you count how many shows?
Yes, I can count them because there aren't that many of them. But yes, I've gotten to see him 3 times.
Okay.
I went once in 2003. He played at Comerica Park in Detroit, which I think was like one of the first seasons or first events held in that park. I think the Tigers maybe didn't start playing there until the next year. Anyway, yeah, so I saw him in 2003, and then 2004 they came back around to Detroit, played Cobo Hall on that Vote for Change tour, where he played with John Fogerty was there, and REM was there, and then this band called Bright Eyes did the opening slot, and then Cobo Hall's right across the street from I want to say the Fillmore or wherever somebody else was playing that night. So then the Dixie Chicks came over when they were done, and then they were on stage, but at the end of the show. So I mean, there was, we put REM and E Street and Bright Eyes and Fogerty and the Dixie Chicks, but there's like 25 people on stage, playing by the end of the night. That was pretty cool. And I got to see that one with my mom. Actually, I went with my mom, so that was something. Something we'll always have, which is very cool. And then we got to see him one more time in 2007. I want to say it was at the Palace of Auburn Hills, and it was right after The Rising came out. So he was playing a lot of The Rising, or not The Rising, Magic, right after Magic had come out.
Well, very cool. You didn't make the Second River tour?
No, I did not make the second. Nope, I did not make that, unfortunately.
We always, we enjoy the ones we get to see, but we also like, damn it, I missed that one. Yeah.
Yep.
So, any memorable stories from the shows that you want to share?
Well, what was really cool about seeing him in 2004 was to see him with all these other bands. To see him up there, to share the stage with Fogerty and, trading verses with Michael Stipe on Man on the Moon. But it was just cool to see how he's always in charge, no matter who's on stage. I mean, John Fogerty is a legend, Creedence is amazing. But, and REM is a huge band. Michael Stipe's an amazing singer, amazing performer. And everyone just kind of lets Bruce, control it. He's like the ringleader of the circus. It's really cool to watch him do that. That's what I remember most of them was watching him with all those other people, and he was in charge. You could just tell.
What I couple of things that makes me think of that, Jake, is when Tom Morello tells the story about the first time he's on stage with Bruce doing Ghost of Tom Joad, right? And they're debating the key, and I don't remember the exact key, but so forgive me, musicians, if I get this wrong, but it was like Bruce said, it's going to be an F and it's going to be great, basically, and Morello's like, okay, yes, you're the boss.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I also know, I like many fans, I subscribe to Ken Rosen's, daily email with this day in history, and Bruce, and he talked about, I think it was just recently over the last week or so, that Bruce was supposed to open for, I think it was John Sebastian, and Sebastian heard the sound check and said, yeah, I think we'll switch. I think, like, this guy's a loving, a loving spoonful. I mean,
Yeah.
just this is, and then like, let's just switch, right? It's
Yeah.
yeah. So that's great.
Mhm.
Um,
Well,
I,
that reminds me too of a story I heard. I want to say it was in my freshman year of college. I had this like history of rock music class. It was awesome, and we saw this video, and I don't even remember most of the context. I just remember it was an interview with Tom Petty, and they were talking about Bruce, and Tom was telling this story about how one time they had played like a benefit show, and I think it was either like the night before Bruce's birthday or the night of his birthday or whatever. So like all through Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers set, the fans are chanting for Bruce, Bruce, Bruce. It kind of sounds like booing. So Tom got backstage. He goes, "Well, gosh, why were they booing us out there?" And so, no, they weren't booing. They were just saying Bruce. I go, "Oh, okay. Well, what's the difference?" So
yes.
they just wanted to see Bruce that night.
When Tom Petty died, I told that story, and I love that story. I
Oh,
just
good.
love the idea that he's like, what's the difference, guys? I mean,
Yeah.
it is, and you just accept that.
Mhm.
So what were your thoughts of Western Stars and Letter to You?
Have really honestly really liked both of them. I like Western Stars a lot. I like how it feels very different from the rest of his albums. It's really kind of a whole different atmosphere, a whole different vibe. Um, in in a lot of the way it sounds. I mean, I know he's written songs like this before. Devils and Dust or Ghost of Tom Joad, but this one just kind of had and especially now that I've seen the movie a couple of times too, it had a really cinematic quality to it, and I'm really glad that he made that movie, um, with the live performances and everything, because that's the album always felt very big to me. Like I think that some of the comparisons, like you can compare it to Ghost of Tom Joad or Devils and Dust, but some of those are like smaller songs, whereas I feel like the songs in Western Stars are really big. Like they're just these really big songs. I just feel I picture these wide open spaces, and I love that album. The cover of the album, that really sets the tone. And I really liked Western Stars a lot.
Yeah, I did too. I share this a lot in the podcast, but my mom especially was a big Glenn Campbell fan, and
Mm-hmm.
and so um so hearing those songs, with the Jimmy Webb, Glenn Campbell vibe,
Mm-hmm.
really felt like, oh man, I can't believe, just really well done. And I promise you, Jake, I'm not revisionist. I remember thinking, God, this album sounds so good. I wish he would do a small tour of with
Yeah.
that orchestra, because when they did Tucson Train, the video, like,
Oh
God,
yeah.
I would love to see this. Just it, and
Mm-hmm.
and then I actually, like I mean, even if they didn't come close to Dallas, maybe they'd film it and I could get a chance. So then when I got the chance, then they did announce they were a film. It was just such a joy.
Mm-hmm.
First off, I'm jealous of the band. I'm jealous of everyone who got to go to the show.
Of course.
And the barn is just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's such a great experience. And I've had a few people who are not Bruce fans that I've recommended, saying, if you want to have a Springsteen night, do Blinded by the Light and Western Stars, a
Oh
double
yeah.
feature. I
Yep.
said, and you'll get a very interesting coming of age show
Mhm.
story, and then kind of an insight to Bruce. Um, you know,
Mhm.
but yeah, I agree with you. In fact, I say this a lot, Jake, but I'm a big fan of the TV show Justified,
Oh yeah. Yep.
and Elmore Leonard. It was based on characters Elmore Leonard had written,
Mhm.
and it feels like these could be a collection of Elmore Leonard short stories,
Oh, certainly.
right?
Yeah.
It has that feel, that
Mhm.
very literary, um, similar to Nebraska's a bunch of stories.
Right. Mhm.
And I guess for that matter, Tom Joad as well,
Right. Mhm.
but yeah, I agree. How about Letter to You? So let's talk about a little bit about it.
Yeah. It's been I know we just passed a
Yeah, we
year.
just hit the birthday. Yeah.
Yeah, when I remember, when it was coming out, um, and this sounds kind of silly, and some of my friends would probably laugh at me if I, says, but I remember, when it was coming out, and that, Apple TV was having their whole big premiere and everything, and I was watching some of that, and I think at midnight, they're going to play the first song. I think they'd already released what Letter to You and Ghosts, I think, had already come out.
Yeah.
Had already been played, so I'd already heard those, but they were going to play like the next song from the album. And so it was like going to be at midnight, so staying up late. I didn't have my daughter that night; she was with her mom, so staying up late. And it was just myself, and God, I mean, the year everybody had in 2020 was just awful. There was just nothing. There wasn't a whole lot of good going around, in 2020. So here we finally get to, and I know Western Stars had just come up, but like I'm like, all right, we're gonna get some new Bruce music, and this is gonna be great. And I remember the first song they played was "Burning Train," and I cried. I just because like, oh my God, it's new Bruce Springsteen music. This right when I need it, and this is awesome. And it was a great start to the album for me. So I ended up I've really liked that one too. It's really it's been a good year for me with that album.
Yeah, I have said that, in fact, just recently, someone on Facebook, I think, said, "Oh, it's been a year. Um, do how do you think it's aged?" And I said, and a couple of them said, "Well, it's certainly not one of his greatest," or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
and I just answered. I said, "Look, I said I can't distance from the context for me."
Yeah.
Right, like and I'm basically going to say exactly what you just said, right? 2020 was horrible. We had had so much strife, and people just hating each other, and there's just this politically horrible, and then to say nothing of the hundreds of thousands of people dying.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden you get this, "Oh, Bruce is doing a new album." What?
Yeah.
And then oh, and wait a minute, not only is he doing a new album, he's doing a film of the recording of the album. And
Mhm.
oh, he's doing this massive PR where he had some of the best interviews of his
Oh
career.
yeah.
And so I try not to rank albums, just because, depending on the day, like, oh, Tunnel of Love.
Mhm.
Oh, I love Born in the USA. Oh, well, Born to Run. Well, how about The Rising?
Yeah.
How about Magic? Wrecking Ball. All of them have many, but Letter to You will always have a point, because it just felt like we had been sunburned,
Mm.
and your mom had taken the alloy, cold cream, and put it on your back, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden you stopped hurting a little bit, just for a little bit. And
Mhm.
so that's the album feels that way to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And The Rising has a lot of similar qualities to that too. And that's one thing about Bruce, just on as a whole, comparing him to other artists. I mean, there's a lot of albums that I, adore by a lot of different artists, and they all have, their own special meaning, everything, but not every artist, like not every artist, every album has a story. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
with Bruce, every album is part of part of one part of my life in a very significant way. I can't even say that about anyone else, even like even Dylan. Like I don't have any connection to Down in the Groove. That's just a terrible, hard album to listen to, and I don't,
Yeah.
I don't really enjoy that one. But even Springsteen, I mean, I would say Human Touch is his weakest album. There's still songs on it that I love. You
Yeah,
know.
I totally agree. And I also have a connection. You were talking about my first live show
Mm.
was a Rising tour. And in fact, um, I loved your story about the Rising, because a I was a casual fan at best. I'd bought Born in the USA and Tunnel of Love, and I'd bought the live version, but I'd kind of drifted off, just not listening to Bruce much. And when I turned on that, fundraiser, and where there was the band singing about, the city of ruins, and I went, oh my goodness. And then when I saw him live, I went, oh, what is this?
Yeah.
And so, so I have that kind of, there is always a special part. In fact, I kind of, I was disappointed when I heard that a lot of the Rising shows just were not recorded in a way that they can release them through the official archives.
Yeah.
Because, my first show was in Dallas, and I would love to have had that, an official version of that show.
Oh, of
So
course.
yeah, absolutely. What are favorite, and once again, we just said here we don't like to rank, but what are albums and songs that have mean a lot to you and your family?
Well, certainly, I mean, you've mentioned a couple of times Tunnel of Love. I didn't, again, I always, I liked Tunnel of Love, when I first heard it when I was a lot younger, but it was never one of my favorites.
Right.
And probably sounds like a cliche, but I mean, I got a little bit older. I went through a divorce, and I understand Tunnel of Love so much better now than I did before. And not even all the songs on it are breakup songs or sad songs. There's some happier songs on there too, but it's just again, it's kind of the tone and the mood of the album. It's really something. It's great. I mean, it's shot up, near the top of my list in just the last couple of years of albums I can go back to over and over again.
Yeah, in fact, I've shared that. I think you either need to have some age, have your heart broken, or been in a marriage or a relationship for a while before you can understand, before Tunnel of Love speaks to you. And that's why I'm always surprised, and it happens every once in a while. I'll have this, young fan, like in their early 20s, that will talk about how much they love Tunnel of Love. And I was like, have you just had a really bad, and they haven't. They just somehow the music spoke to them right away about, and they did that. So yeah, I agree. I love, in fact, when there's people who talk about, well, I don't want to see another album show. I'd love a Tunnel of Love show. I mean, I just would, that would just be so exciting. What are some other ones you love?
Gosh, I mean, there's so many.
Sure.
One that my daughter loves. Now, my daughter is 9.
Okay, great.
And she's pretty tolerant with some of the music that I play. Like she's not super into like Dylan or Neil Young or even Springsteen yet, but she'll give it a listen at least. And there's a couple, every once in a while she'll be like, I like this one, I like that one. She's real into stuff that a lot of kids are into. I mean, she's into like Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, and all that, which I think is totally fine. I actually love Taylor Swift, completely unironically. I think she's great.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen her talk about meeting Bruce on YouTube.
Oh, I haven't.
So it is worth, and you may want to look at it, then share it with your daughter. She talked about that. Bruce brought his daughter and a couple of her friends to the show, and they came back afterwards, and and basically Taylor Swift handed him the guitar, and he signed it and started playing Dancing in the Dark for her. And she was just like, like, this is the ultimate, she became a fan.
Right.
And that's cool. Anytime you see that happen.
I love that. Yeah. I love stuff like that. But the one song that my daughter absolutely loves, and I can't remember if she heard the song first or if we read the book first, but she loves Outlaw Pete.
Oh, how fun. Did you buy her the book?
Yeah, and we found the book, and it was the weirdest thing. I remember when it came out, but I didn't get it. So I did not have a daughter at the time, so it wasn't
Yeah.
really on the radar so much. And then we have we live in a very small town, like in northern Michigan. We have, one of these cheap dollar store,
Sure.
stores there. And I just remember walking through the book section, and there was Outlaw Pete sitting there for like $3.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, and I was like, why is this here? This like, of all the random things just to find, like you usually find like Disney stuff or
Yeah.
Paw Patrol or whatever, like in the kids book section, there's a copy of Outlaw Pete sitting there for a couple of bucks. So yeah, we bought it, and honestly, like I said, now I can't remember if the song came first or the book, but she loves them both.
Yes. No, the book came afterwards. He had worked with the animator to draw the book, and it's, his lyrics. And
Mhm,
I will tell you, I was not a fan of Outlaw Pete till
mhm.
I bought the book, and then kind of reading it and seeing the imagery, I've
Yeah.
liked it a lot more now.
Yeah. Oh, I do too. And I knew the song came first. I couldn't remember if my daughter heard the
Yeah,
song
which
or if
one
we read the
which
book.
one she loved first. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I can't remember which one did that.
Oh,
Yeah, I felt the same way when I read the book. I was like, man, this story is actually a really cool story.
yeah.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
So you're raising her to and ready to take her to a show, right?
I am ready to take her to a show. Yeah, I mean, if he tours in 2022, which the rumor is that he will,
Yeah.
and she'll be 10 probably by then. I mean, that might
Yeah,
be time to take her to one.
I think so. I think she'd enjoy it. I think
Yeah.
that'd be good. Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Mhm.
Um, so any other stories or songs that she likes or that you that mean a lot to you?
Certainly, the songs that mean a lot to me, like kind of the whole Rising album. Again, like I kind of mentioned, I went to pick it up at midnight when it came out. We have Meyer stores in Michigan. That's where we used to go, buy our CDs because they were open 24 hours. So we could go there at midnight, on Monday nights because CDs used to come out on Tuesdays, right? Is that
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Yeah, yeah. So it'd be Monday night, midnight. I remember I went with my friend Bob, who likes a lot of the same music that I like. Is into Springsteen and all that. So we share a lot of that together. And that's who I went to see him in 2003 and 2007. I went with my friend Bob,
Hmm.
and a couple other people. But so I just remember driving to Meyer that night, being excited to get the album, unwrapping it right away, putting it in the car and just driving around because it was summer. I think it came out
Sure.
in July, I think. So it was summer, so we didn't have to get up for anything in the morning. We were early 20s at the time, and just driving around listening to that album. And I hadn't really heard any of the songs from it. I'd heard My City of Ruins, I think I'd heard The Rising, but then
Yeah.
there's 13 other songs on that album, and gosh, they're pretty good. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a really strong album. I think even removed from the context of the time. Yeah, I think it's a really strong album. There's those, and then of course, I mean, who doesn't have an attachment to Born to Run?
Yeah.
It's the cliche answer, but I mean, it's 8 songs. They're all perfect. I mean, I'm sure other people have more eloquently stated all the, the charms and the beauty in Born to Run, but it's just perfect.
Yeah.
Oh.
Absolutely. So let's say we get a chance he tours and you're getting a chance.
Mhm.
What are songs you want to hear live?
Oh gosh, again, so many, and even some that I've heard, I would love to hear him do again. At
Yeah.
this point, but I mean, as far as new stuff, he was out with E Street. I don't think really the Western Star stuff would be much that he would play,
Yeah.
for the after season. So if he's out with E Street, I mean, I'd love to hear Burnin' Train live.
Yeah.
I think that would be great.
Absolutely.
And I think that'd be a great song to start a concert with. I think he talked about that in an interview.
Yeah.
When they played it that night, so that'd be like a great song to open with. I'd like to hear "I'll See You in My Dreams."
Yeah.
I think would be really great to hear from the new album, and "House of a Thousand Guitars" I think would be great.
Yeah.
Really great one to hear too, and one that I always want to hear, and I've seen him play it once, but I always get excited when this is on. He releases those archive releases every month or whatever. I always get excited when it's on there. If I ever go see him again, I just want him to play Youngstown, just the way he plays it live. That song, like, I was deeply obsessed with it for I think a week, maybe it was about a year and a half ago, when I listened to it almost nonstop, and I think my girlfriend thought I was insane. She's really come around to liking Bruce now, but she was not not anti-Bruce at first, just kind of ambivalent, didn't really
Yeah.
no, wasn't, but she's kind of come around to liking it. But yeah, I went through this week where I couldn't stop listening to Youngstown, and just the way he transformed it from what it was on the album into what it became in the live shows. Like particularly I had that live in New York version, from the reunion tour CD. And man, it's just the things he did with that song and what he turned it into, I still think is just incredible. And that line, there's this one line in that song where he's describing the town, and he says, those smokestacks reaching like the arms of God into a beautiful sky of soot and clay. Oh man, that's so cool. Like nobody else describes stuff like that. That line in particular just got me. There's a couple other versions I've heard. There was a Philadelphia bootleg that came out, but the version is just incredible. And that's, I mean, I love hearing that song. Love hearing that one live for sure. And I've always loved Land of Hope and Dreams too. That's a great one. I don't know if I've ever seen that live. I know I saw him when I saw him in 2007. He closed with American Land, which is super fun.
I love that song. It definitely makes my top 10, and I will. Land of Hope and Dreams is probably my number one song. Like when I had to, just there's something about that hope and that happiness just means a lot to me.
It's a terrific song. I prefer the live version to the one that they did for Wrecking Ball, but either way you do it, it's just a terrific song.
So what do you think when he tours? What kind of show do you think we'll get? We just Blogness on the Edge of Town just had a poll, and it's like the choices were, well, he'll do a lot of Letter to You, he'll do maybe a mixture of Letter to You, Western Stars, he'll do more of a greatest hits. What do you think we're going to get when he tours again?
Well, I think it is going to be a lot of Letter to You. Just because it's funny, they didn't really spend a lot of time with those songs. They made the album in 5 days?
Yeah, exactly.
That they made the album. So I mean, I'm sure they rehearsed and everything before that. So I mean, they're with them, but I mean, some of these albums take years to complete, and they spend months and months on these things. So I feel like, gosh, they'd probably be sick of the songs by then. But they didn't spend a lot of time with these songs, so I would imagine that they want to get out and play them live and kind of get them out there. It's a different experience to hear the song live, even if they're playing it exactly like it is on the album.
Exactly.
It's still going to be different. So I think they'll do a lot of Letter to You. I really don't see a lot of Western Stars coming up, just because again, they're not, won't have the orchestra. They'll be with E Street, and I feel like it's kind of like a self-contained, like he did everything he wanted to do with Western Stars by releasing the album and then the film. And I feel like that's just kind of, it's like, other than American Land, you don't really hear Seeger session songs at like the E Street shows, so I don't think he'll play a lot of Western Stars. But then I think it'll be a pretty typical Bruce show after that. I think he'll do a lot of Letter to You, and then it'll be some greatest hits, and hopefully some deep cuts and some surprises. And I mean, if I went to a show and he would play something like like Incident on 57th Street, or Part Man Part Monkey, or just something just bizarre and off the wall, that would I think that would be super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So what should I have asked you that I haven't asked you?
Oh, well, that's a good question.
And to tell you while you're thinking, I had a guest, years ago, and we had our discussion, we finished, and then I turned off the recorder, and I said, hey, this was great. I really appreciate you being honest. And he goes, oh, no problem. He says, next time I'll tell you the time I got drunk with the E Street Band. What? How do you not lead with that? Right? So I'm not saying you got drunk with the E Street Band, but if there was a story that you're like, oh yeah, I meant to tell him that, now's a good time, right?
Gosh, I definitely don't have anything that cool. Certainly not that cool that happened. Gosh, trying to think of something that would be a good question to be asked, or something that I would ask somebody. I mean, I would, I'd probably ask someone like, like if you got to meet, if you got to meet Bruce, what would you say? Because he
Well,
seems
okay.
like,
Yeah, that's a
he
good
seems like,
question. Yeah, what would you? Is there what would you want to know?
I would, God, I would probably ask him. I don't know, maybe this is like cliche or anything, but I would ask him like, what's his favorite song of his? What's his favorite album of
Sure.
his? It's going to be completely different than what musicians and artists in a lot of ways are I find are strange judges of their own material sometimes.
Yeah.
But I feel like Bruce is really on point with that. Like I think he knows like what was good and what was not as good, and I just
Mhm.
think he'd have a really interesting perspective on that. Like
Yeah.
he's so different than like, I mean, for me, it's like Springsteen and Dylan are like the greatest songwriters ever. And it's like a 1A and 1B for me. I have a hard time choosing between them
Hmm.
because they're so different where like, Dylan can write songs like, I mean, anything on Blood on the Tracks, like
Yeah.
just this is like Idiot Wins, like, oh my God, who writes, like what kind of alien species is writing this song? Where do these, where do these images come from? Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts, like all that kind of, odd stuff. And Dylan, I feel like is not approachable. Like I've seen Dylan in concert, like I've been fairly close to him, just like,
Yeah. How many times have you seen Dylan perform?
I've seen Dylan 4 times actually.
Okay.
Yeah, early 2000s. I got to see him, a couple of years in a row. Saw him tour once with Willie Nelson, which was very cool.
My
But
friend went to that show. When it came to Dallas, it was at a ball field,
yep,
and yeah, and he really enjoyed it.
it was great. I mean, I didn't know who, like Lucas and Micah Nelson were at the time, but I think they were playing with them too. And Emmylou Harris was with them that night. So it was it was way cool. It was at a ball, minor league baseball field. It was awesome. But when I look at him, like he doesn't seem like approachable. Whereas like, you see somebody like Bruce and you watch him do interviews and he just seems like a regular person. I mean, for a guy who's got as many hundreds of millions as he has, he just seems like such a regular guy. And I mean, I know I'm not saying anything, anybody listening to this doesn't already know, but to me, that's the appeal. Like I feel like he could be your neighbor, and he's just a guy, whereas like Dylan, I feel like is just going to evaporate into thin air one day back to his home planet or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and Bruce just feels like a real human being. He's the coolest.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Um, all right, so um let's move on to the Mary question.
Yeah.
So if you are a friend of Jacob and you're listening to the podcast, first off, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed listening to your friend. I think he's done great. But I end every podcast with the Mary question. And what that is Jay Armstrong, who is an honors English teacher, recently retired in the Philadelphia area, he will have his seniors spend 2 days breaking apart the song Thunder Road, looking at the lyrics, looking at the themes, and talking about what the song means and what the story Bruce is trying to tell. And at the end of the 2 days, he asks his class, does Mary get in the car? So that is your question, Jake. Does Mary get in the car?
100%. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yep.
Give a little, you have any justification? Explain your answer, or?
It's hard to, because it's just it's just the feeling I get. I think he's written other songs where Mary didn't get in the car. Like stuff on maybe like Nebraska, maybe a couple things on the river. But Thunder Road just doesn't strike me. It doesn't strike me as ultimately sad. I think she gets in the car. Yeah, it just, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I can't really articulate it, but it doesn't feel like one of those songs. Like compared to something like Highway Patrolman or like Stolen Car. Like those songs kind of have a more somber tone that I feel like Thunder Road just doesn't have. And I feel like, especially it being the opening track on the album, I don't think that album would start that way.
Okay.
That just doesn't feel, that doesn't feel right to me. Maybe if it was the last song, but Jungle Land goes on last, and you can't top that at the end. So
okay, very nice, good. Any final thoughts you want to share?
This has been really cool just getting to talk about Springsteen. Like I said, my girlfriend, I don't know if she'll end up listening to this whole thing or not. She puts up with a lot of of my talking about him. Like I said, she likes him now, and she's pretty into him. But I'm a fanatic, and she puts up with.
Yes.
So it's nice to be able to talk to another fanatic too.
Well, think about poor Mrs. Set Lusting Bruce, my
Yeah.
lovely bride Linda. And I can't tell you how often, Jacob, I'll go, hey, you want to hear something? Is it about Bruce?
Yeah.
Never mind. Like,
Yep.
it's like, okay, yeah, then no, never mind. No, just so yeah.
Yeah.
Are you on it? If someone wants to reach you, are you on any social media at all?
Yeah, I mean, I have a personal Facebook page, and
Okay.
I am a big movie guy too, so I have a Letterboxd page. I don't
Okay.
know if you're familiar with what Letterboxd is, but
No,
it's
send me what's that link? Or
it's
you
just
can send it to me.
yeah, I can send it to you. It's like it's almost like a social networking site for the movies you watch. Like you can log the movies you watch, put star ratings on them, search out other movies, make lists of things you want to see, see what other people are watching and rating. Like, I've got some of my friends on there and some other people that, I just think are interesting, write interesting things. You can write reviews. It's all kinds of like movie stuff. It's just, if you're a movie nerd at all, you have to be on Letterboxd. It's very cool.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite genre or a couple of favorite directors or song
Yeah. Oh,
or films you love?
yeah, definitely. I love. I've been going through their movies again with another friend of mine. The Coen Brothers are probably my favorite. I was actually, my brother and I were born in the same town that Joel and Ethan were born in, which is St. Louis Park, Minnesota. We didn't become famous filmmakers, but we were still born in the same town, and I like telling people that. But the Coen Brothers, I mean, Fargo, I think, is perfection, and The Big Lebowski is I've seen 100 times and is still amazing. And their early films, Your Blood Simple, Miller's Crossing, Barton
Sure.
Fink, and then even on into the later stuff, Inside Llewyn Davis, and they're just I think they're fantastic. They're probably my favorites, and I love some of the other cliche choices too. Like, of course, Scorsese is amazing, and Stanley Kubrick is amazing. Stanley's probably the best. Kubrick's probably the best ever. But yeah, and I love documentaries too. Like, I really get into documentaries. Try to watch 20 to 30 new ones every year if I
Okay.
can.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I see that Brian Wilson, they have a new documentary coming out. I'm excited about seeing
Oh, they
it.
do. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, they've done multiple of things with him, like the Making a Smile, another thing.
Right.
Before I was obsessed with Bruce, I was obsessed with Brian.
Yeah, I
So
could
he
see that. Yeah.
remains one of my, favorites. So, well, very good. All right. Hang tight while I close up.
Sure.
Listeners, thank you for listening. Please go get vaccinated. Let's get this pandemic behind us so we can go see live music. Let's remember to social distance, wear your mask when you need to, wash your hands. Let's all be good to each other, because that's how we're going to go through this. Jake, thank you. Listener, thank you. And we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlustingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlustingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlustingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Lusting Bruce shirts, as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.